Hey there, I'm the Communication Doc, and this is the second video in my series, How to Be Ready for Romance and Avoid a Broken Heart. So if you haven't seen my first video in this series, then you need to check it out. I gave you some statistics to kind of set the stage, and then I also talked about my first key point, which is that you need to guard your heart and take your time. So my second key point with regard to this topic is you need to figure out who you are and what you want out of life before you start getting too much involved in romantic relationships. Now, in my last video, I explained that most people say they fall in love between the ages of 15 and 18, and less than 2% of those romantic relationships actually work out. And the majority of people in the US anyway usually don't get married until their mid to late 20s. So again, that's about 10 years where people are having romantic relationships that aren't working out and they're getting broken hearts. That time when you're a teen and an early adult is really a great time when you're figuring out who you are as a person and what you want out of life. So again, that's the time you're in high school, you're starting to establish your own identity. A lot of people go to college or get training and decide what kind of career they want to have. And those decisions are all a lot harder if you actually are in a romantic relationship, because you're going to naturally consider that romantic relationship when you're making those decisions. So for example, you have a boyfriend and you're deciding where you want to go to college. You might be considering, well, where's your boyfriend going to go to college? Are you going to be apart? And you might also be considering, well, what do I want to major in? What does my boyfriend want to major in? And are those jobs that are going to be compatible? So there are a lot of things that you have to take into account when you're in a relationship that are not as difficult to decide, or you don't have to consider those aspects. You can base them solely on who you are and what you really want to be. Now, I explained in my last video that while I did start falling in love pretty young, I had a long period of time where I didn't date and I didn't get married until I was 34. And that was a great time because that was pretty much all of college. And I went ahead and I got a bachelor's in psychology, and then I decided I wanted to go into communication, and so I did a master's and a PhD in communication. I wasn't limited by where I went because of having to consider a boyfriend or any kind of a relationship. I was able to go out of state. During that time, I also finished my degrees, and then I started working. And because it was just me, I had additional money that I could then use to travel. So I had a really good friend that we started traveling together. We went overseas to all kinds of places, had all kinds of great, really wonderful experiences that I may not have been able to have had I been in a relationship, or especially had I been married or had children. I mean, just the educational part itself would have been much more challenging if I had been married and especially had children, because it's very difficult when you're continuing to do degrees and studying to also be able to have time to devote to a home life and especially to taking care of kids. And usually, if you're in that position, it takes you a longer amount of time to get your training, whereas I was able to do it and go straight from one degree to the next and finish them in a quicker period of time, and then go ahead and start working and fulfilling my desire for my career. This time is also a great time for you to really focus on developing great friendships and meaningful relationships with your family. And those are also going to be a part of helping you figure out who you are as a person. And so you want to make sure you allow that opportunity. Now, as you're forming these friendships, you're also going to realize that there are some things that you like about certain people and some things you don't like. And those are things you should really pay attention to as you're thinking about a romantic relationship. However, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in the next video, so I'm not going to go too much in detail into that idea. But you don't have to be dating people to figure out what you like and what you don't like. Friendships can allow you to do that, and those friendships can be very meaningful. So there's lots of really valuable things you can do in that 10 years between when people normally first fall in love and when they actually are ready to have a committed relationship. And those things are all really key to figuring out who you are as a person and having your own individual identity. Because let's face it, even when you do end up in a committed relationship, you want to be your own person. You want to still have your own identity. Not every relationship works out, and not every person is going to end up being in a committed relationship long term. And so you don't want to be in a position where you really have no idea who you are or what you want in life. A relationship has ended, and now you're basically just completely lost in life. So again, the first principle is to guard your heart and take your time. The second one is to figure out who you are first before you start jumping into romantic relationships that will likely end up breaking your heart. Please share this information with anyone you know who's in their teens, early 20s, and as always, subscribe and share to my YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at The Communication Doc. And until next time, let's get communication healthy.